What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 1 prize picks preview for this week's BMW Championship. Going to get you prepared for Thursday's slate, what to expect from the golf course, which for this week is going to be Wilmington Country Club, and then some of the props that I have my eye on here for the first round. So we'll start with the golf course. It's a brand new one on tour. Make sure we're all on the same page. We'll talk about the weather for round 1, which is always important when taking a look at this sport specifically, and then talk about the categories that I'll be trying to dive into here for the first round. So let's start with the golf course, which right here, we have it up on Pro Visualizer, and this is a little bit outdated. So it's a par 71, that part is correct, but a little bit longer than the 7,310 yard mark that you see here on the screen. It's playing closer to 7,534 yards, which for a par 71 makes it one of the longer holes, or one of the longer courses, I should say, that you really find all year, especially per shot. You can see there's a few long holes, like a 630 yard par 5. That's not going to be reachable by much of the field, but you also have a few shorter holes, right? Like 360 yards, for example, 390. A few of the other par 5s are easily reachable, like 532 yards, and even 614 yards. That one plays significantly downhill, are going to be reachable by most of the field. So it's definitely a bomb and gouge type of golf course. Players that have that added distance off the tee are going to be in much better positions to go out there and score. And one thing to note here as well is they are massive greens. 8,100 square foot. And just to give you a little bit of perspective there, the average green size on the PGA Tour is closer to 6,000 square feet. Last week at TPC Southwind, they were just 4,300 square foot, so nearly double the size as what we saw for last week's event. So you're dealing with a unique golf course, definitely one that's long, like I mentioned, but also one with large greens. So I don't expect it to play all that difficult. A scoring average, probably close to a stroke, maybe even a stroke and a half under par, but definitely an emphasis on the longer players. So when we take a look at the weather, you also see that it's going to be nearly ideal. There's low winds throughout the entire day. In the morning, single digits in terms of the sustained winds. You can see anywhere between 3 to 7 miles an hour. The wind gusts don't really kick up till right around 11 to 12 p.m. And then throughout the afternoon, it's a consistent 7 to 9 mile an hour wind. And then the wind gusts only getting up to right around 10 to 12 miles an hour. So you're looking at pretty much ideal conditions, but it's worth noting that there's not going to be a quote unquote AM versus PM wave. They're all teeing off within 3 hours. The earliest tee time, I believe, is 9 a.m. local time. And then the last guys will be teeing off a little bit towards the afternoon. So you're looking at, not a huge spread in terms of when guys are going to be teeing off. So I wouldn't expect there to be a huge advantage in one direction or the other. Heading over to PrizePicks now, let's talk through the boards, because you'll see on the right here, they're all going to be matchups that I'm taking, but I want to give you my thoughts on the birdie or better board, and then of course strokes. With birdie or better, guys, you're pretty much late to the party. There's a reason why I have my Patreon. I'm putting out picks early. All of the guys up top are already bumped, and in fact, I took the overs on all of them. I had over on Rory, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Zalatoris, Justin Thomas, Cantlay, and Tony Finau. All of these players were guys that I took overs on, and they were at 4.5 birdies. Now they're at 5. At this point, I pretty much think they're fades. Getting to 6 birdies is a completely different story than trying to get to 5. You're looking at having to birdie 33.3% of your holes to go out there and make 6 birdies out of 18, which is going to be a tough task regardless of the golf course. And with so many unknowns, I'm not going to count on that, right? There's one quote-unquote drivable par 4, that one that's 360. You have the 2 reachable par 5s. That's not enough for me to bite on guys there at 5. So for me, it's going to be a fade at that point, if not taking the under on some of the guys there at 5. In fact, even as somebody that has the over and 4.5 on quite a few players there, I just think there's so much equity for these players to go out there and get to 5 that it might be worth taking the under on a few of them and a few cards. So we'll have to see there. I definitely wouldn't be taking the over on anybody at 5. That is just way too risky a proposition. In terms of the guys at the bottom of the board, I'm a little bit more willing to take the over on guys at 4, but it's still, not really what I'm looking for. I want an elite level player anytime I'm taking an over here on PrizePicks. So for the birdie or better board, it's mostly going to be a fade across the board. Just a few isolated people that I like. And if you're looking for who I'm actually taking on that board, make sure to check out the Patreon. In terms of strokes, it's a similar story. A lot of unknowns here, right? When we're trying to take down, a prop board, it's useful to know the scoring average. And then of course, what types of players succeed there. We don't know either, right? So for us to try and take an over and under on birdies or trying to take an under and over on strokes would be guessing at the very best, which means that the prop that I think you should focus on, at least for the first round, before we get all of this information here on Thursday, is going to be matchups, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how the golf course plays. It's a head-to-head matchup where all of the players are susceptible to the same conditions. So when there's more unknowns, usually I'm a proponent of steering clear from matchups. They're actually my least favorite category in all of PrizePicks. But when we have all of these unknowns, things that we can't necessarily control, we have to play into those, right? They're actually going to be our best bets for this slate. So in general, I don't think this is the best slate. I'm going to be completely transparent about it, especially after the bumps on the birdie or better board. I would be playing lightly on the slate, to say the least. But if you're going to be targeting anything, it's going to be these matchups where, I'm taking the over on Tony Finau versus Maverick McNealy. With Tony Finau, his 2 wins out of his last 3 starts, is gaining across all 4 stat categories. In fact, is a great putter on bent grass, which is the surface that you get around Wilmington Country Club. So I like him over McNealy. McNealy's a high birdie percentage player, so it's far from a gimme. But when you're looking at pedigree, somebody, you're projecting for a 50-50 type of outcome, I'm going to be taking Tony Finau all day. It's not really even a question. It's the same story with Jordan Spieth, right? 2 players here between Jordan and an HV3 that are more than solid enough when it comes to pedigree. In terms of birdie percentage, also relatively close. But when you're looking to split hairs, right? Jordan Spieth, clearly head and shoulders a better player than HV3. With some of the other arguments here, right? Colin versus Max Homa, that's a much closer proposition. Fitzpatrick versus Hand, that's a much closer matchup. If some of the guys up top, like a Burns versus JT, it's nearly even, especially when it comes to birdie production. Even somebody like a Rory versus Cam Young. Cam Young's one of the best birdie makers we've seen ever on the PGA Tour. His stats in terms of birdie or better percentage are elite of all elite at this point. Whereas, a Tony Finau versus McNealy, there's quite a large edge to be had there, and especially with the Spieth versus HV3 prop. You're talking about an elite level guy in Spieth versus somebody that's above average in an HV3. Those are the type of matchups I'm looking to take advantage of. Finau has the driving advantage over McNealy, and I would argue that Spieth has an even larger driving edge, even though he's not as good a driver as Tony Finau, obviously. But because of his matchup against HV3, who's a relatively poor driver, should have a lot of success there. In terms of a few other matchups I'm taking the under on Kevin Kisner here. So I'm taking the Corey Connors side in that matchup, and that comes all down to the ball striking. Kisner is a lot shorter off the tee, not the best iron player, whereas Corey Connors is an elite level driver, has both the distance and the accuracy we're looking for, and is a much better approach player. And when you compare their stats on bent grass, sure, Kisner's a better player, but that's not his favorite surface, whereas Corey Connors gains 0.2 shots per round on the bent grass surface. So I like to see that. He's clearly hitting the ball well and has the skill set I'm looking for at this golf course. Because remember, it's nearly 7,500 yards. You have thin fairways, relatively large greens, which should be easier to hit. But if you're going to be 50, 60 yards closer to the hole, you're going to have a lot better ability to hit it close. And lastly, we're taking the under on Sepp Straka, and we're going to be taking the Alex Smalley side. Sepp Straka clearly getting a bump. He's even on the board this week because of his success last week. And the last time he showed up at an event, he went out there, won the Honda Classic. He went out and completely busted for like the next 3-4 months. He was just absolutely dog shit, was not playing nearly to the ability that he did at the Honda Classic. So don't be surprised if he completely falls off the face of the earth again. Goes out there, gets his FedEx Cup points, ends up making it into Eastlake, and then probably sneaking it up again. Would not surprise me whatsoever. He's not really that guy. He's not a high pedigree player. He'll pop from time to time, but that's really what he is, right? He's inconsistent. Will show that ability every once in a while. And when we're taking a 50-50 type of prop, right, a matchup, we're just looking for somebody to beat one other player. It's very binary in that aspect. I'm always going to take the more consistent player, particularly when it's Alex Smalley, who's not only more consistent, but head and shoulders a better player. I mean, Alex Smalley's on the trajectory right now to be something up there in the top 30, top 35 on the PGA Tour here in the next year or so. I mean, he's one of those rookies this year. I mean, in any other rookie class, you'd probably be talking about him at least in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. But given how strong it is this year, he's not going to have any sort of shot at that. So he's kind of that forgotten last man out, but still on a great trajectory, has shown a lot of ability over the last few weeks. And I'm clearly taking the under there. So if you were to match all these up, take them in a power play, which I wouldn't recommend. I would recommend the flex play option here. You're going to get a 5x payout, right? 1.5x if you get 3 right, which I'm pretty confident in doing out of a 4 prop sample size here. I mean, all these matchups have at least a 10 to 15% edge to be had. That's what I would go with, right? It's a matchup prop. They're still very susceptible to variance, which is why I wouldn't power play it. But like I said, this whole board in general is a little bit sketchy for round one. So I wouldn't be doing many power plays to begin with. So go with the flex option there. And like I mentioned, guys, fade the birdie board. They're too high. It's a very risky proposition to go out there and try and take them at 6 birdies. And even with strokes, it's a par 71, so they've got to shoot 4 under par to get to a 67. I don't know if I can count on that from my players. But that's all I've got here for the first round. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more prepared to make your own cards. We're going to be trying to do this for rounds 2 through 4 if possible. Sometimes with bumps, sometimes just with the timing of the board, it's not possible. So I apologize when I can't get it out there for you. But hey, when I can, hopefully it's helpful for you guys, and we can continue to go out there and get some cash. I'll remind you, if you're looking for access to all of my picks, they are on my Patreon page. I post all of my cards there, talk about confidence levels. I do write-ups for a lot of the reasons I'm taking props. And like the birdie or better board, right, when they were at 4.5, I was able to get those up on Patreon before they actually saw that bump. And it happened within an hour and a half, so you have to be quick, even when you're on the Patreon, to catch some of these props, but it is the best way to go out and do so. So, like I said, guys, best of luck with all of your slips here for round one, and let's get this cash.